Tak dobré odpoledne, já vás zdravím a opět začnu stejnou otázkou. Kdo potkal alespoň 2 nové lidi? Jenom zvedněte ruku. No tak která, to je ještě pořád co zlepšovat, tak doufám, že další přestávku využijete k networkingu. Nyní nás čekají témata, která hýbou městy v roce 2026. Jsou to třeba otázky jako například, jak mohou data pomoci k lepšímu a srozumitelnějším rozhodnutím a jak k tomu pomáhá umělá inteligence. Jak nové nápady nejprve otestovat na nečisto, kde hledat zdroje pro financování inovací nebo jak pracovat s talenty. Některé přednášky budou opět v angličtině, takže pokud budete potřebovat překlad, tak tamhle si vyzvedněte staničku se sluchátky. And now let me switch to English, and it's my great pleasure to invite our first keynote speakers. And AI and data are everywhere these days. But do they really help us make better decisions? So let me invite our first keynote speakers, Barry Singleton and Dennis Doctor from Nexus, UK. And they will tell us more. So there is a clicker, the first microphone and the second one.
Clicker is...
The green one. This one, the arrow. Okay. This is lighter. And the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dobrý den, everybody. It's a huge pleasure to be here in Brno, which is a sister city for Leeds, and I really wanted to first of all say thank you so much to the people of Brno who've made us feel so welcome. This is my second year at Urbis. My name's Barry Singleton, and my slide has disappeared from the screen. But I'm the engagement manager for Nexus, and Nexus is the University of Leeds' innovation hub, and we help companies that want to develop evidence, to connect and collaborate with academics. And actually about 8 years ago, I brought a Canadian AI company into the University of Leeds' environment, and Dennis was one of the people who assessed whether we were fit for purpose and whether we were the right kind of company to bring into that community. So Dennis, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barry. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to have us, and we're very grateful to our sister city, Brno. My name is Dennis Doctor. I am the Smart Cities lead for Nexus, as Barry has explained, the innovation hub for the University of Leeds. But for the university, I'm also the institutional lead on digital twins. My background is very much, I'm a logician, and until today, I didn't know that one of the most famous logicians, Mr. Gödel, Dr. Gödel himself, comes from Brno. So it's a great honor to be here. And one of the things that I really try and focus on is data-driven decision-making and complex systems. So when you have complex challenges, how can you build an architecture that is actually capable of delivering the impact that you want to achieve?
So, yeah, clearly Dennis is the brains, and I like to say that I'm the beauty of this relationship. But that's taking a bit of poetic license here. So let's get into the talk that we've planned today. So Dennis and I have the conversation to assess companies that often doesn't happen when AI is in the conversation and in the room. So Dennis, let's talk about AI. So if a vendor comes up to a city leader or to you and says, our AI solution's going to reduce traffic congestion by 30%, what's wrong with that? Why shouldn't they just sign up for it?
Well, I mean, in general, that's already a very bold statement, right? And it's understanding, one, what are they trying to do? And when you talk about something like congestion and why it happens, very often people talk about the enabling technology, so something that helps you understand what the scale of the problem is. So if I put a sensor somewhere, I can see the amount of cars that might be going through, but that doesn't mean that I know what the solution is. And very often the reality, we all want to see the left image, which shows this beautiful city, but very often we have to deal more with what's on the right, which is dealing with all the small problems, all the garbage that gets left. And especially when you look at AI, it's very much garbage in, garbage out. So it means that when somebody makes such a bold claim for such a complex challenge, it's about, well, actually, how do you know that this is going to do it? Because the way our city operates is completely, and we have different modes of modalities of transport compared to other cities. So I'd already take that with a pinch of salt and really want to see, well, what the proof is.
So I'm quite a simple person, and I love the way that Dennis helps me to understand complex things in a more simple way. So let's talk about games, Dennis. So explain to us how you think of looking at AI and complex things in terms of games.
Well, yeah, I'm an avid gamer, so I always try to try and explain things to make it simpler. When I talk about systems, roughly there's two ways of dividing systems and then two ways that they're coupled. So there's something that we call linear systems. I don't want to call them simple systems because they'll still be complicated, but there's something like linear systems. So take, for instance, the game of chess, right? Moves are set. Moves are finite. One wrong decision means that you almost can see the changes of events that are happening, which means that, as we have seen, similar to Go, it's easier to automate because there's a clear ring fence on how this works. But complex systems, they have to deal with other things. One example is, for instance, Traitors. I don't know if you know the show Traitors, or, for instance, Dungeons and Dragons, if you do know that. But you're dealing much more with power distribution, with human behavior, with negotiations, with, behavioral things, social cultural norms, why you would use a technology and why you would not use a technology. So trying to automate these types of processes is much more complex because the sum of the parts is much greater than the whole, and if you don't understand the relationships, it becomes very complicated.
So talk a little bit more about games and analogies. So let's think about energy optimization. You would call that chess, I guess, yeah?
In a way, yes. Obviously, there's the behavioral factor of how people use the energy. But if you, for instance, look at energy creation or generating energy, these are things that are more easier to model. Again, it can be complicated, but they very often follow a linear structure. If this, then that, which makes it a lot easier to automate. And one of the important steps is identifying, we talk about it here, identifying the right pieces. And something that is linear, like chess, it's more easy to understand how the pieces interrelate. But you don't want to end up being a chess player in a rugby match. So you want to make sure that what games do I need to bring? And that's where we come back to the enabling technology. What pieces do I need? So what data do I need to actually be able to understand this type of system, and how do I capture that?
So energy optimization, chess. What about something like housing allocation or allocating police resources?
Yeah, that becomes normative, doesn't it? And very often, as soon as something becomes normative, where you talk about a fairness, for instance, it becomes complex because you make a decision about people who will get something and people who won't get something based on a set of standards that are quite fluid, right? Depending on what the end result should be, according to someone, you'll have different interpretations, and that makes something modeling that incredibly complicated.
So people say, data is the new oil. All you need is more data and you'll be able to make better decisions. Is that true or is that untrue?
I'd say that's very often a misconception, right? The biggest thing when we look at data and automation is garbage in, is garbage out. So again, understanding the data that's relevant to your challenge, understanding the challenge you're trying to solve and what data you need for that is step one. If you don't, we often say falling in love with the problem. If you don't want to bury yourself and fall in love with the problem and understand the scope of why people behave in a certain way, then it becomes very difficult to play the game, basically.
So people play games, people like to bend the rules, and arguably, they cheat. So talk a bit about the games and the rules of games and maybe apply that to this context of AI, Dennis.
So yeah, and I think, and we can go to the next slide, I think, to highlight two sides of the coin. One is there's something that is not intentionally cheating, right? An algorithm is designed to do a certain purpose, and it will do that to quite a high degree of efficiency. That doesn't mean it's the right decision. It has merely been designed to do what it's taught to do. So if we take some recent examples, for instance, we had a tragic terror attack in London, for instance, with the London Bridge attack. People that tried to escape this area and wanted to use an Uber. Of course, Uber saw a huge increase in demand, not to hate on Uber, but that led to them charging incredibly high prices to just be able to leave a terror zone, basically. Another example recently is for those that have been traveling to Arabia, for instance, with the Iran war. If they wanted to leave, suddenly air travel tickets rose exponentially. And that's where you have to see, well, actually, it's not the system cheating. It's just the system doing what it's designed to do, and there's a lack of human intervention, which would lead to putting the foot on the brake and saying, actually, this doesn't work. But then the other side of the coin, when we actually do start talking about cheating, right? We've been cheating since that we've been playing games, or since that we have systems. So I'll mention one very early example that's been written down is about 420 years BC, where a Spartan chariot racer pretended to be from Thebes so that he could participate and win and cheat in the game. But the most recent example, for instance, is when people figured out that one of the biggest Make America Great Again influencers was actually a young guy in India pretending to be a blonde woman from America. So you can almost see how, as the game, the technology we use to play the game might change, but the way people try to influence it always remains. And you will always have people who will try to beat, cheat, and influence the system.
So we're not saying that people shouldn't use AI because it is everywhere, but what are the things that maybe people can do or people can consider to make sure that they're applying AI in an ethical and responsible way?
Yeah, and that brings us, that whole question about where is the human? And we talk a lot about, or you hear a lot of noise now about multi-agentic AI, right? We have these agents making decisions. Now, the first thing you always have to wonder is, can this agent make the decisions the way a human would do? So the Turing test, is anybody here familiar with the Turing test? No one? Someone, yeah, is trying
People
to...
nodding, Dennis.
I know, good. Basically trying to see whether you can make a distinction between a human answer and a machine answer. And when there's indistinguishable, that's something where you can say, okay, it's doing it to the accuracy that we would like. We would now trust this for us to make the decision. But it depends, right? And then that's where a human is either in the loop or on the loop. So when you're, as a human, in the loop, you are the one making the decisions. So AI might provide you with the data to make a decision, but it's in the end always a human making the decision. When it's a human on the loop, it's only when certain situations arise that you want to be informed. So take, for example, a bridge. You have a monitor on a bridge. You don't want somebody standing on the bridge constantly watching whether the bridge is doing what it's supposed to do, whether there's infrastructural damage. You can have sensors for that, so you can use edge compute to do that. But again, you only want to hear from that sensor if there's something wrong. Because you only get the time if you have 1,000 bridges in a city, like look at, for instance, Amsterdam. You don't want to be constantly told this bridge is doing fine. You only want to be told this bridge is now having a risk, so that's when you can do an intervention. So as a human, you get more of a chance to focus on the quality rather than the quantity. But again, I think one of the most important things to realize is, am I playing chess? Or am I actually playing, for instance, traitors? Am I dealing with something where I understand the rules, and therefore, as I understand the rules, as I understand the game, I can start mapping the pieces, I can start looking at how I integrate the data properly, because obviously data integration is still a massive problem, and then I start doing that. So think about, for instance, permits. You go through a strict process of applying for a permit. These are the exact examples where you follow a linear process. But when you look again at, for instance, distribution of housing, distribution of police force, that makes it a bit more complicated, and it's much more dependent on what challenge are you effectively trying to solve.
So what you kind of need to do maybe is treat AI as a capable but not necessarily tested new starter in a company. That's one way that we've kind of been looking at it lately. So we're coming to the kind of end of our time. Dennis is actually delivering a workshop tomorrow afternoon in the Archimedes classroom around data-driven decision-making, which, despite being my language, I always find very hard to say, so I'm pleased I've got that out in one go. So maybe just kind of sum up what we've talked about here in this time on stage. So what are the 3 rules of engagement that we hope people might take some value from these last 13 minutes or so?
Yeah, no, very happy to. I think when we look at it, rule 1 is, what game are we playing? Are we dealing with a linear system, or are we dealing with a complex system? And if you know how to make that distinction, it can already help you make an assessment of how easy is this challenge going to be for me. Then step 2 would be, are we using the right pieces? Is the data that we're collecting correct or incorrect? A lot of historical data is biased, so you want to make sure that when you look at the challenge, you get the data that is representative of the problem you're trying to solve. And the last question would always be, where is the human? Do I need a human involved from the start, or do I need to make sure that it's okay if the human only gets informed when there's a deviation?
Thank you, and really we wanted to leave you with one message, which is, before you do deploy any AI technology, we urge you that you should really check your tech before you deploy a rec.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really love the analogy of garbage out, garbage in, garbage out. And I have one question. Do you use AI in your personal life for your personal decision making? Okay. Okay.
Every day I use it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just for kind of validating my wacky ideas that I have, and to validate myself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And visit their workshop tomorrow. And now let's talk about sustainability. So it's my great pleasure to invite Christina Salmhofer, sustainability strategist from Stockholm. And Stockholm Royal Seaport is one of the largest urban development projects in Europe, and at the same time a prime example of transforming a former industrial area into a sustainable urban neighborhood. So I'm really looking forward to your talk. The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you for this incredible, inspiring session from the former speakers. I'm going to talk about one of the largest urban development projects right now in Stockholm, which is called the Stockholm Royal Seaport. I'm going to talk about how to move from policy to implementation, and especially also how to design, how to plan, and how to build a city district so that it's easy to do things right from start. The Stockholm Royal Seaport is a very large brownfield area. You can see on the picture, I think most of the cities had these kind of areas with heavy industry, in that case connected to the harbor activities and energy production. So we have this really big and large area, about 240 hectares, that are going to be transformed into a vibrant part of the city of Stockholm. This is how the area looked like in the year 2009. You can see it's a large-scale, small-scale industries still in the area. You have this really large ferry terminal. You have still oil depots. You have a container terminal. And in the forefront, you also see one of the really large energy production, gas production industries, which were playing such an important role for Stockholm for the last 120 years. And all that was more or less a closed industry. So in the year 2009, the city council decided that this area should transformed into this city district for about 60,000 people living and working. The city owns the land. That gives us a great opportunity to set really tough requirements when we are selling and leasing the land. And the city of Stockholm, and I'm working for the development administration, is responsible to build and plan everything when it comes to public spaces, but of course also responsible for the remediation of the project. So, and this is all financed more or less by the selling and leasing of the land. And at the same time, the city council decided as well that this district should become a model, a front runner for urban sustainable development. So this is what the area looks like right now. There are about 7,000 people already living in the area, and we have worked a lot with public spaces, of course, when it comes to parks, when it comes to streets, but there are also about a bunch of preschools, a primary school already in the area. But I need to give you some kind of framework just to better understand how we managed to implement the great vision for this area. First of all, as I mentioned, the city council decided that this should become a front runner. So the political will was really the core in our work. At the same time, the city of Stockholm has very high institutional capacities, expertise with different kind of administrations and companies, such as landscapers, planning architects, and so on and so on. And that made a really big difference when it comes to how to work and to collaborate between those silos we mostly are used to work with. How can we connect those different administrations, and how can we best collaborate? At the same time, we have a very high transparency in the municipality. and their demographic processes. So there's a very high trust and legitimacy in the municipalities' work. And this makes a really big and important core in the start of how to work in collaboration within the city of Stockholm, and especially when it comes to urban development. Then of course we started with our governance model. The most important for us was, what are the preconditions in this area? How can we work, and what kind of strategies and policies do we need to develop together with our colleagues from the different administrations and companies? And of course, strategies is not all. We need to implement this as well. So we are using all the instruments we have in the city of Stockholm, such as land allocations, procurement when it comes to the design of the city, and when it comes to our own contractors. And at the same time, of course, we need to monitor to be able to evaluate, do our strategies really lead to the fulfillment of the different targets and the vision for the area? And of course, at the end of the day, we need to involve all our stakeholders. And this is not just about the residents, it's about the developers, it's about academy, and of course, our own colleagues. So I'm just walking through very fast through the different strategies we are applying in this area. First of all, it's about the vibrant city. We need to connect this new city district to the rest of the town, just to be sure that people could bike and walk and go in by public transportation to the other parts of the city. Of course, the public spaces, which we are responsible for as a development administration, are so important when it comes to safety, when it comes also to prepare those different spaces for the different needs of the people. And of course, mixed functions, the different functions of land use, such as residential buildings, offices, amenities. It has to be the right mixture, right? Right now it's about 80% residential, but it's going to change with more amenities and offices, so that you have this safety feeling throughout all the day. And then, of course, we have about 50% rental apartments and 50% tenant-owned apartments. When it comes to mobility, it is so important to prepare the city to make it possible to move in a sustainable way. So we are prioritizing, in the first hand, walking, the second hand, biking, and the third is public transportation. So the car parkers, it's not on the street. You cannot park on the street. It's the parking on the street is for visitors, it's for deliveries, but it's not for the people living in the area. They have their parking spaces beyond their buildings. It's a half parking space per apartment. And in the coming up phases, they will have external garages for that. So it's getting really, really difficult to go to your car. It will be always closer to the public transportation or to your bike. And of course, the streets are reserved for the green structure, and for the people walking and biking. So this is also a very important principle in our planning process. Of course, when it comes to everyday services, kindergartens, schools, supermarkets, they need to be really close. So one of our other principles is that these kind of everyday services have to be within walking distance, which means 400 meters, 5 minutes walking. And this is what we are working towards, and that's actually, we achieved this in the first phases. Green structure, blue structure, very important principles when it comes to getting prepared for the climate change. So this is actually an image of a street. This is a planting bed. Actually, it won the Landscapes Prize, which is very unusual for the green structure in the streets. And this is fulfilling several functions, of course: recreation, stormwater management, and increased biological diversity. So all the green spaces are working in that way, if it's a planting bed in the street, if it's a park, or whatever. And of course, all the developers also need to have green roofs, they need to have green courtyards, and they have to prove it by calculations, which we are checking at the same time. And then, of course, ecological connectivity from the National City Park to the rest of the city is really important as well, just to be sure that the animals, amphibians, insects and so on can move from one part to the other. And at the same time, we do perform also a lot of different research and development projects when it comes, for example, how to integrate urban farming in the urban planning process, which is right now ongoing. Energy efficiency, a really important part in our work as well. Of course, all the houses that are going to be built have to be passive house standard. Right now, they are 20% below the Swedish national building code. They have to produce energy locally by PVs and solar panels. Right now, they produce about 770 megawatt hours per year. And we also have some cultural industrial buildings, which I showed you in the picture, and they have to be better than 50%. Of course, we also work a lot with embodied energy, energy that is used to produce the different kind of building materials. We have very bad soil conditions in this area. We need to do a lot of heavy infrastructure projects, such as bridges, quays, tunnels, you name it, and a lot of remediation. So we're working really hard to minimize the climate impact through in the early design processes, but also in collaboration with our contractors, of course. Another important part is to prepare the city as well for the fossil fuel transportation, so we are working a lot with the EV infrastructure. All the buildings are connected to the automated waste management system, and they have to sort all the other fractions on building level. And twice a year, we do have a pop-up reuse center who is visiting the area so that the people could bring in the stuff such as furniture, books, which they wouldn't need anymore, but that still could be reused. So we are collecting every year about 5 tons of things that can be reused later. I mentioned remediation. Of course, we have to do a lot of remediation. We have to prepare the land for the developers to build upon. We need to stabilize the soil as well. So we are excavating quite a lot. This is one of the rock materials which are going to be reused within the area. We have the local mass consolidation center that we bring all the excavated rocks and bulky materials, sorting, cleaning, and reusing within the area or selling actually to other projects. But we also use and are testing via research and development projects local land remediation in situ so that we do not need to excavate as much soil as you traditionally would. And last but not least, of course, participation and learning is a very important target area we are working with. We have a very broad consultation process where we are inviting also residents which are sometimes more difficult to reach, focusing on young girls, for example, just to bring in their opinion about what they would like to see in the new area. And which is also a very important part to build trust upon. And then, of course, we are working a lot with capacity building when it comes to our own colleagues within the city, but also the developers. And it's a mutual learning process where we try to really to listen as well to the developers and their new ideas about how to build a sustainable urban district. And at the end of the day, monitoring is one of the most important parts, just to be sure that we can scale up best practice to the rest of the city. Thank you.
So much. I would like to ask for a take-home message. The example was incredible, but was the first step that we can do as individuals?
Sorry, you mean
because everybody wants to improve something, so
Yeah.
what would be your recommendation?
for city districts that are going to be built?
Or even something smaller, because I have that we don't have the capacity to change the city district right now,
of course.
something smaller.
But I think you need to listen to the needs of the people in the city district. And you have to identify what are the low-hanging fruits as well. Because I think there are sometimes, as you say, you don't need to focus on to change the whole city. But sometimes it could be important just to start with very small things. But it has to start from the needs of the city district. It could be everything that would involve also the people living in the area, because what you really need to develop is this bottom-up approach of the people engaging and wanting to participate and wanting to change. But I think that could be a very good start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Christina Salmhofer. And now let's talk about innovations and fundings. It's my great pleasure to invite Gretel Schach, Head of Markets and Partnerships, Senior Governance and Digital Innovation Expert at Babel Smart Cities in Spain. And the floor is yours, and she will tell us about cities are full of good ideas, so why can't they get funded? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you still have some energy for us for this afternoon. I will talk about money. So hopefully, maybe for some of you, I see some faces that are quite familiar with how to get money from different sources creatively. We just heard about Stockholm with the leases, so that's also a very smart way to get money for your projects, to reinvest in the city development. But I will focus now on funding, and I would like to get some understanding of who we have here in the audience. So I would like to see a quick raise of hands if you, let's say your organization, whether you're from public or private sector, has ever applied for European or national funding. Just a quick show of hands. Okay, would say like 2/3 maybe. And this goes for public sector, but did you know that at this point you might be able to access about 2,000 different funding opportunities? You might show your hands. Did you know? If you didn't know, you keep your hand down. If you knew, you can keep it up. Of course, that would depend on the topic that you're working on, if that's more energy, or if we talk about also greenfield or brownfield management, the restoration of different parts of the city. That really depends on the topic, but there is a lot out there. And so my intention is to show you a little bit of that, and also some examples of what other cities have done. So no matter big or small, there are alternatives for many out there. So just putting us into context, we are well aware, and this is also why we're focusing so much into funding and accessing financing. It is because cities have so much pressure on delivering ambitious climate targets and many other agendas that the cities are responsible for. However, in many cities across Europe, the budgets are shrinking. There is not much budget available for these topics. And so the question is, where will that money come from? And so some might come from national governments. There are several programs that national countries are making available, but there is also at the European level. And it's actually estimated that the European green and digital transition will require about $1 billion of investments per mid-sized city. So that's a lot of money, and I would guess that your city might not have all the funding or all the resources available for that. And that's why we are trying to make available and make clear and visible what options are out there in terms of funding for cities and what exactly would match with the type of projects you have. So this doesn't flow as I want. So just this is for sure not a complete overview. I just said that there are thousands of different fundings available. But what I wanted to say with this is it really depends on your need, the type of funding or opportunity that you would look for. So there are some small funding that you can access to frame your project, to maybe develop the concept or the investment plan before you go into the whole large investment, like we were just hearing from Stockholm. There are other fundings that are more on the regional level. So you might have here Interreg or Urbact, where you get to meet cities from across Europe to learn on a concrete subject, exchange and experiment on small projects. But there are also larger projects, and with this larger funding that might come from LIFE, which are focused on climate change, energy, and also sustainability and nature-based solutions. There are also other options that come from the European Investment Bank, where you actually get financing for your projects or even technical assistance for your projects. So they might give you also some money to manage the projects you have, of course, in certain sectors, for example, for the mobility transition or the energy one in buildings, and also the energy transformation in cities. And of course, we do have one that many people are aware of, which is Horizon, that's very innovation focused, but that's just one side of the picture. And this also doesn't cover the whole spectrum of opportunities. But what I want to say is there is a right match of a funding that goes along with each type of project. Sometimes you bring innovation, and so Horizon or EUI might be a good alternative. Some other times you just want to have the budget to do renovation or to frame the project to work with your citizens. And so you need to be careful with that matching. And that's why I wanted to show you some examples of when I collected these examples, I realized I put a lot of Germany there. We do work with Germany, but with other cities across Europe. But I think they are good examples in terms of size of or volume of the projects. So, for example, with Potsdam, that's close to Berlin in Germany, we work with them to help them apply for a national smart city funding. And there, what we helped to frame was like how the city was going to develop the whole digital infrastructure. So many of their services were going to be digitalized. What changes they needed to do in terms of technology, but also in terms of the internal processes of how that data is shared and its use. And finally, they actually got these 10 million euros to invest in this digitalization of the municipality. We've also worked a lot with Ireland, so the city of Galway. And a couple of years ago, we started to frame with them the type of projects they wanted to work and where they wanted to get additional funding from, where it was not directly coming from the local budgets. And so, for example, we helped them frame a project where the main idea was to renovate a lot of social housing, build new housing also, which was energy efficient, but primarily also develop a whole model that will help them replicate this in other social housing units, where they could actually have all these energy renovations and have highly efficient buildings. And those 30 million is actually a sum of different funding. So they got a couple of them built over the years because they are building a whole narrative of what the city is aiming to do and how each of these projects helps them achieve that. So there is like a cycle of that builds into that pathway. So, but there are also small cases, and maybe not that crazy innovative, where small municipality in Germany, in north of Germany, they simply wanted more funding to renovate a canteen in their school, in one of their schools. And so there is also possibilities for that. And actually, given that, for example, in the context of Germany, where so many municipalities have their budgets shortened or cut down, they're also looking for budgets for the regular operations, which that allows for a different conversation. But what I want to say about that is that there are fundings for that too. That it's not just about high innovation, which is great, and actually now we can do things more efficient, but there is also a variety of funding that can be made available for a diversity of projects. So with that being said, I think one of the reasons on why many of the projects go unfunded is first because there is such a complexity around this ecosystem of what is available and what are the conditions. We know that here they might fund you, but you need to comply with certain requirements, or you need to bring your own funding. Also, many people inside municipalities are not aware of how these funds work, and so they might be reluctant, even if you're like very convinced of the idea that you will get this money and will help you implement new projects. You might face resistance because of the complexity of these requirements. And ultimately, the limited capacity that many organizations have to prepare these applications and meet with all these requirements that are out there. And so one last thing on my side, because this is quite critical, it's building that strategy that will get you to find the perfect match in terms of funding. I will help you build that pipeline of projects that will be matching with the strategy you have and the transformation that you're aiming to run and deploy in the city. So having that priority set up before you look into the funding, that is critical. You need to first know what is it that you want to implement, and then you can look into what actual funds can help you get there, or whether your municipality maybe has those funds. If you are the lucky city that actually has all the funds to do all on your own, fantastic. But many out there actually do need some extra support to get there. And finally, the last thing is you really need to make that whole story, the whole argument and justifying on why you really want to go for this funding, how it helps you achieve your goals. And so making that story quite complete will help you also have applications that are successful. Today I woke up kind of generous. I felt I will not just talk about funding, but I said, I'll be giving you a chance to share with me, if you scan that QR code, you can write about a project that you have in mind and you're looking for funding. And I'll promise that I'll share with you some funding opportunities. I just felt I wanted to give away something, and sometimes it's like very lonely to be on this side. So you may scan that QR code, have some fill in some basic information about your project, what you want to get, and of course leave an email address. I cannot guess who you are if you don't leave that contact. And I promise in the next week I will share a couple of ideas with you. So that's all from me for today.
Well, wow, thank you for this opportunity. It's really generous. And I would like to ask, is it improving? Because you mentioned all the challenges and all the obstacles and the complexity. Can you see, are you an optimist? Can you see that's improving?
Actually, yes. Not sure if I'm optimist in all areas of life, but I do see actually a lot of smaller cities getting involved, looking into alternatives on how they can get their projects implemented. And it's also very clear that the more we spread the word, the lower becomes the barrier to enter these processes, and for cities also to take on the opportunity and implement more, because ultimately the goal is to make cities better places to live. And so how can we get there and have the majority of the resources available? So yeah, I do see a change, and it's not just the larger cities and capital cities, but also smaller cities that are getting on board.
Wonderful, that's good news. Thank you so much. That was Gretel Schach. A nyní se přepínáme opět do češtiny, takže if you need an English translation, please pick up a headset in the corner. A budeme se bavit o talentu, protože Brno se dlouhodobě profiluje jako město talentů, místo, kde mají prostor studentky, mladí vědci, vědkyně a inovátoři, kteří společně utvářejí jeho budoucnost. Proto mi je velkou ctí, že přivítat Františka Kubeše, vedoucího odboru strategického rozvoje a spolupráce na magistrátu města Brno. A je to vaše.
Děkuji za uvedení a děkuji za ten potlesk Ještě jsem nic neřekl, ale už mám úspěch, tak to jsem rád. Víte, pro mě je strašně důležité, že tady na takovém panelu můžeme vystoupit, protože každý z těch příspěvků je o něčem jiném. Mně se to strašně líbí, jak je to pestré a opravdu to je vlastně naplnění toho, co je název toho dnešního setkání. Tedy téma, která hýbou městy a která jsou pro rozvoj měst důležitá. A já jsem si řekl, že budu mluvit o talentech, že budu mluvit o tom, jak se město snaží tuto oblast nějakým způsobem podporovat, protože nejsou to jenom ta data, která dělají město chytrým, a nejsou to ty technologie. Když se dělala první metodika Ministerstva pro místní rozvoj o Smart Cities, tak tam bylo jasně deklarováno, a platí to doteď, že Smart City je vlastně o lidech, že lidé jsou to cílovou skupinou veškerého toho snažení, které je pod tím pojmem Smart City realizováno. A pro mě navíc jsou lidé nejenom tím, co dělá to město chytré, ale je to také to, co odlišuje jednotlivá města od sebe. Jestli ta města budou úspěšná nebo budou méně úspěšná. A když se bavíme třeba s protějšky, které mají na starosti v jiných městech podobné velikosti nebo podobného významu v Evropě oblast rozvoje města, strategického rozvoje města, tak identifikujeme i v Gracu, i ve Wroclawi, i v Lipsku, že vlastně ti lidé je právě to, na čem musíme stavět tu naši prosperitu. My v podstatě přistupujeme k budování konceptu Smart City jako k tomu, že vlastně podporujeme celý ten ekosystém, který je založen na talentech, na lidech. Máme spoustu aktivit, ať už projektových, nebo řekněme takových networkingových, které jsou pro nás z hlediska té naší cesty důležité. Budu o nich ještě hovořit. Máme tu na čem stavět, protože máme tu skoro 70 000 studentů. To je v podstatě 1/5 oficiálně registrovaných obyvatel města Brna. My máme něco přes 400 000 obyvatel. A máme také více než 20% z těch studentů, kteří vlastně nejsou z České republiky. Já samozřejmě vím, že můžete namítnout, že jsou to primárně Slováci. Nejsou to jenom Slováci. A ten podíl vlastně jiných cizinců, nejenom těch Slováků, roste. U PhD studia je to dokonce ještě vyšší číslo. Já jsem minulý týden byl součástí jedné takové mise s univerzitami, s Masarykovou univerzitou, s VUT, ale také s Vysokou školou chemicko-technologickou z Prahy v Kanadě. A když jsem tam prezentoval tohle číslo, tak i lidi v tom Torontu vlastně zbystřili, protože si uvědomili, že to je vlastně velmi vysoký podíl, jak teda těch studentů ve městě, tak i těch zahraničních. Protože jinak jako je nemáme ničím moc co natchnout, přece jenom my máme 400 000 a oni nějakých, a vlastně ani nevím, jestli 7 milionů nebo víc. Takže tohle je třeba něco, co rád prezentuju a co opravdu nám ukazuje, že máme na čem stavět a že jsme si zvolili ty talenty velmi chytře. Smart. Tady už také zaznělo, že bylo to u toho panelu, který začínal ve 12:30, že my opravdu investujeme do vědy a výzkumu. Je to skoro 3% hrubého domácího produktu, což je více než je průměr EU a je to samozřejmě i více než je průměr České republiky. My máme dlouhodobě ty talenty součástí strategických plánů, které v Brně máme nejenom do šuplíku, ale jsou to strategie, se kterými fakt reálně pracujeme. Je to Brno 2050, my jsme zrovna včera měli velkou odbornou konferenci v předvečer Urbisu právě na strategické plánování, kde jsme si zopakovali ty základní východiska strategického plánování a také jsme se zamýšleli ve 3 vybraných oblastech, co je vlastně nového, jaké jsou to výzvy, které ta města, ale vlastně i celá Česká republika a EU čelíme, protože jsme tam měli zrovna jedno téma, které se věnovalo demografickému stárnutí. Máme integrovanou strategii brněnské metropolitní oblasti. Je to už druhá edice pro druhé programové období, kdy se nástroj ITI implementuje ve městech a jejich zázemí. Já vždycky říkám, ITI je jenom nástroj, důležitá je ta strategie, která obsahuje i další relevantní témata, která překračují administrativní hranice toho konkrétního jádrového města, v našem případě Brna. A máme regionální inovační strategii. Velmi důležitý dokument. Já jsem si dělal takový jako průzkum, nebo ptal jsem se kolegů z jiných krajských měst v České republice, jestli oni s tou riskou pracují. A většinou ne. My tu risku máme pojatou z hlediska governance tak, že máme pravidelný koordinační setkání, kraj, tam je náměstek, za město jsou tam političtí představitelé, za úředníky, za město jsem tam já, potom můj protějšek z krajského úřadu, je tam samozřejmě JIC, který to orchestruje a řešíme na pravidelné bázi implementaci té risky. To je pro mě velmi důležité, že to opravdu jsou dokumenty, které jsou živé. A já jako vedoucí odboru strategického rozvoje a spolupráce samozřejmě musím vždycky to strategické ukotvení zdůrazňovat. Tady vidíte to, na čem také stavíme, jsou to lidé a v těch lidech, nebo ti lidé jsou z různých institucí. Pro mě je důležité, že ten regionální inovační ekosystém tady funguje, má tady tradici. My jsme identifikovali vědu, výzkum, inovace a vzdělávání jako pilíř rozvoje města už ve strategii, která předcházela té 2050, a to bylo už v roce 2006. Takže je to už 20 let, kdy my jsme si řekli, že tohle je něco, co Brnu zajistí nějakou prosperitu do budoucna. A spousta se tady toho událo a myslím si, že to bylo velmi chytré. Tehdy jsme ještě teda pojem Smart City nepoužívali. Jaká je vlastně role města? To, že jsme si to vytyčili jako strategický cíl, neznamená, že to město může něco přímo ovlivnit. Nemá to ve své přímé kompetenci, na rozdíl třeba od základního školství nebo dopravy, místní hromadné dopravy, ale i tak můžeme vytvářet podmínky pro inovace. U nás je to prostřednictvím například rozvoje talentů, kdy tady vidíte některé pilíře. Je to už samozřejmě dáno tím, že přes ty základky, ale i třeba střední školy, kraj můžeme ovlivňovat výchovu a rozvoj těch žáků, těch talentů, těch budoucích mozků, které ideálně chceme tady udržet. Zároveň ale potřebujeme lákat další mozky. K tomu je důležité, že máme například dlouholetý stipendijní program Brno PhD Talent. Udělali jsme si evaluace dopadla opravdu velmi dobře. Vlastně nebylo tam co vytknout, mě strašně potěšilo. Já jsem si říkal, jestli to nějak nezměnit, ale opravdu ne, ten projekt je sám o sobě velmi dobrý. Je to také projekt, který máme v rámci CAPEXu, nebo projekt CAPEX, na který přispíváme. Vůbec se snažíme budovat to Brno jako značku pro talenty. Podporujeme například Vida Science Centrum tady vedle, nebo jsme zřizovateli hvězdárny a planetária. Zapojíme se do toho ekosystému, to už jsem říkal, a také se snažíme podporovat velmi významně Brno Expat Centrum, aby se tady integrovali cizinci, pro které je prostě problém, že ta čeština je velmi složitým jazykem. Začínáme od těch dětí, takže jsem rád, že vznikla aktivita, která podporuje vzdělávání nebo přilákání, mě napadalo spíš anglické slovo, přilákání vlastně těch dětí na ty obory STEM. Určitě doporučuji nějakou takovou podobnou aktivitu i ve vašich městech a regionech. Dále dlouhodobě máme například dny elektronové mikroskopie. 1/3 všech elektronových mikroskopů je z Brna. Ale je potřeba mít lidi, kteří tam v těch firmách budou pracovat, a k tomu právě slouží i tady tato popularizační akce. Brno PhD Talent už jsem tady zmiňoval. Pokud budete chtít více informací, tak se určitě stavte na našem stánku. Pak se snažíme dělat mezinárodní marketing teďka pod novým brandem Brno Tech Region, takže to je něco, s čím se určitě budete setkávat častěji. Máme tady i projekt Talent Attraction a Integration Management, to souvisí s tím Brno Expat centrem a je to nějaké uvědomění si, že prostě jednoduše chceme ty talenty tady ze zahraničí přitáhnout. A tady jenom na závěr shrnutí. Bojujeme o ten talent víc než kdy dřív, to už jsem tady zmiňoval, opravdu to mám verifikováno i s kolegy ze zahraničí a velkým problémem může být odliv těchto talentů. Inovace nevznikají v institucích, ty jenom jsou prostředníkem pro propojování lidí a mezi jednotlivými institucemi. Není to něco jako nice to have, prostě potřebujeme jednoznačně talentovou politiku a ta role města v tom je čím dál významnější. Tady máte ještě takový claim na závěr, ten si můžete samozřejmě přečíst. A kdyby vás cokoliv zaujalo potom později, tak mě najdete tam na té naší skromné expozici. Děkuju.
Já moc děkuju a velmi rychlý dotaz. Vy jste zmínil, že jste si tohle téma talentů definovali už v roce 2006 a po 20 letech tady máte velký seznam úspěchů. Za jak rychle, kdybychom si vzali tu best practice, to nejlepší od vás, za jak rychle by se to dalo implementovat do nějakého jiného města, aby bylo stejně úspěšné jako Brno?
Já si myslím, že o mnoho rychleji, protože člověk se může poučit i z chyb ostatních, i z toho, že nás třeba něco mohlo v tom procesu zdržovat. Já si myslím, že ideální je na to ta 7letka EU. Teď nehovořím jenom kvůli funding, ale prostě myslím si, že je to takové jako ideální z hlediska toho, že je to trošku delší než volební cyklus a zároveň se dá spoustu věcí během těch 7 let vybudovat. Zásadní není ani tak vybudovat nějaké ty kilometry a ty stěny, ale důležité je vybudovat nějakou důvěru a to vyžaduje nějaký čas.
Perfektní. To byl František Kubeš. Tak já se moc těším za 7 let, kolik takových podobných měst plných talentů tady uvidíme a o kterých budeme mluvit. Ale dnes, teďka, budeme mluvit o plánování našeho města. Schválně, víte, kdo dnes skutečně rozhoduje o podobě našeho města? A kdo za to nese odpovědnost? Ondřej Vysloužil, ředitel městského ateliéru prostorového plánování a architektury a také zástupce iniciativy měst City Deal, nám ukáže, že to vůbec není tak jednoznačné a jednoduché. Je to vaše?
Děkuji.
Zelené.
Díky. Tak hezké odpoledne všem. Já bych vás chtěl pomocí tady té krátké prezentace seznámit s problematikou plánování. Už tady zaznělo, že se snažíme dělat města dobrá pro život, ale z pohledu městských plánovačů je pro nás důležité, abychom dělali i krajinu, která bude hodnotná a prosperující. Ale v prvé řadě bych vás trošku vyděsil tou naší realitou v Česku. Nám se to právě skrze ten systém, který u nás máme, moc dobře nedaří. Nejde o to, že bychom nedokázali rychle stavět, ale my především pomalu a složitě a komplikovaně povolujeme. Musím říct, že jsem se tady smutně díval na to, jak se připravuje třeba přestavba Královského námořního přístavu, který tady prezentovala paní kolegyně přede mnou. My víme, že město, když si pořizuje ten územní plán, který je vlastně základem, v něm je nějaká dohoda o tom, jak to území má vypadat, tak víme, že ani jedno, ani 2 volební období často nestačí. A dochází potom k jako velmi nějakým komplikovaným výsledkům. Tady jenom Brno teď vlastně poměrně nedávno schválilo, Praha schválila před pár dny svůj územní plán a přitom to je základní nástroj, podle kterého se rozvoj města řídí. Problémem u nás, když porovnáme, to je právě to hranaté kolo, které se netočí, tak ten problém vězí v velké míře v tom, že u nás vlastně do toho významně vstupuje stát, významně vstupuje samosprávám do toho plánování území a ten výsledek se potom minimálně v letech a zároveň ve financích projevuje a dosti negativně. Tady třeba ukázka, když vlastně chcete stavbu povolit, tak potřebujete u nás velké množství razítek, ta vyjádření vlastně těch státních vlastně dotčených orgánů jdou často proti sobě, jdou často v rozporu i třeba s nějakou strategií samosprávy. No a výsledkem všeho toho zdržení, které nastává tím plánováním a těmito procesy, tak výsledkem je prostě velký deficit bytů. Tady vlastně ročně se v Česku dokončí nějakých 33 000 bytů, ale potřebovali bychom mnohem víc, například na číslech v Praze. Výsledkem máme potom ceny bydlení, tak pro srovnání mezi hlavními městy, tak bohužel naše hlavní město je premiantem v tom negativním slova smyslu, kolik potřebujete těch čistých příjmů, kdybyste vlastně nefinancovali nic jiného, neplatili nic jiného, tak kolik potřebujete těch ročních příjmů na to, abyste si pořídili třeba v Praze byt, ale myslím si, že Brno je na tom velmi podobně. Tady právě další čísla. Můžeme říct, že mezi lety 2015 až 2025 je ten celostátní index bydlení, ceny bydlení 120 až 125% nárůst za těch 10 let a přitom mzdy narostly o nějakých 70 až 90%, takže je stále složitější si pořídit vlastní bydlení a lidé potom hledají cesty i za městem a někde tam, kde to nechceme. Těch problémů je vícero, ale jsou to i vlastně problematika investičních bytů, problematika stárnoucích bytových fondů, sídlišť a podobně. Abych vás jenom nestrašil, tak je tady taková výzva. My prostě nutně potřebujeme změnu a potřebujeme se na ten systém dívat trošku jinak a ne mít pořád ta čtvrcatá kola. Možná je to tím, že nemáme rádi změny, že nejsme schopni se rozhoupat k té změně. Možná je to nějakým naším založením, nějakými obavami. Možná je to tím, že stále jak si se díváme stejnýma očima nebo stejným pohledem na to plánování a možná se málo inspirujeme v zahraničí především. Možná je to i naše specifikum, že jsme pořád ještě zakořeněni někde v té byrokracii z Rakouska-Uherska nebo v tom, co jsme dostali i třeba ve škole, jaký je přístup, že potom ve výsledku více se hledí na proces samotný, než na to, na tu věcnou podstatu. A já bych tady rád představil organizaci Sdružení City Deal, protože já jsem z ostravské plánovací městské organizace Mapa, ale spolu s dalšími organizacemi měst máme takové uskupení, v něm se právě koncentrují i ty inovace z hlediska správy dat o území, práce s daty, analýzy, plánování, participace. A my se snažíme, protože máme tu praxi, tak se snažíme dlouhodobě naší republice a představitelům naší země vlastně předat tu naši praxi a zkušenost a pomoci v tom plánování. My jsme my jsme se dali dohromady někdy právě kolem roku 2000, souviselo to s novým stavebním zákonem. A co bylo důvodem? Že Praha bylo připomínkové místo, jinak se měst nikdo neptal, protože města nejsou vnímána jako místa, která, nebo jako entity, které jsou prostě důležité v tom plánování. Jsme stále strašně pozadu v tom myšlení. Když se podíváte, co jsme třeba před 20 lety neznali, jaké pojmy, s čím my prostě pracujeme, ale stále se nám tady dostávají ty principy jako před 20 lety. Pořád máme ten proces postavený na těch čtvrtcatých kolech. A teď se dostávám k tomu možná, co tady zaznělo v té úvodní výzvě nebo v té úvodní otázce, kdo to řídí. Problém je, že to neřídí nikdo. Že nám vlastně vstupuje, těm samosprávám do toho vstupuje stát vlastně pořizuje územní plány. Snad projde v novém stavebním zákoně to, že teda samosprávy budou si moci pořizovat plány, ale vlastně ve výsledku lidé se obracejí na starostu a říkají starosto, co nám to tady vzniká, a starosta za to často de facto ani nemůže. Teď koho se ten problém týká? Já tady zmiňuji ta velká města, ale ta velká města jsou nějaké motory ekonomiky a ten graf, který trošku vypadá jako Milešovka, nebo možná řekněme třeba Říp, já nevím, tak vlastně v velikost těch obcí, počet obyvatel, tak vlastně se to týká se to relativně malého segmentu, pokud se díváte na počet obcí, řekněme perspektiva, kterou má třeba Ministerstvo místní rozvoj, ale vlastně podíváte se, že těch málo měst ve výsledku tvoří velmi významný hrubý domácí produkt a je tam velmi významné množství obyvatel. My máme asi 7 základních tezí, které se snažíme dlouhodobě prosazovat. První je, říkáme, města ať plánují města, obce plánují obce a stát ať se soustředí na svoje státní záležitosti, ať provádí metodickou podporu, ať zároveň třeba řeší data a podobné věci. Říkáme, že města mají mít možnost mít svoje mírně odlišná pravidla dle svých specifik, protože nemůžeme všichni nosit tričko o velikosti M. Jsem rád, že se snad podaří, aby alespoň krajská města měla teďka vlastní stavební předpisy, které se velmi dobře osvědčily v Praze. Potom říkáme, dívejte se na finance, zajistěte, aby v tom územním plánování byly nástroje, které souvisí s financemi, aby skutečně to plánování a ten růst a v těch správných místech toho města byl nějakým způsobem motivován, aby nedocházelo k tomu, že stále se rozrůstáme do volné krajiny. A to je velmi špatně. My jsme třeba připravili i, abychom byli konkrétní, tak naše uskupení připravilo takový společný jazyk, pomocí kterého se dá území plánovat, dají se sdílet data a můžeme si vzájemně rozumět. A už to velice rychle zkrátím. Výsledkem potom je kvalitnější výstavba. Říkáme, že i ta transparentnost, i ta předvídatelnost, když to území je dobře naplánováno, když tam ta dohoda v tom území je, tak pomáhá potom té spolupráci i soukromého a veřejného sektoru. No a tady se možná dostanu ještě k tomu manuálu prostorového standardu. Potom říkáme, že v případě, že ta samospráva bude mít ty kompetence k tomu, aby dokázala to území plánovat, tak dovede lépe vyvažovat veřejné zájmy, že to nebude ten puzzle, který do sebe nezapadá. No a to je to, co jsem tady zmiňoval vícekrát. Potom se nám dostane to, že budeme dokázat lépe zastavovat a zkvalitňovat naše města a ponecháme si příjemnou a kvalitní volnou krajinu. V případě, že se ten systém změní, že budeme skutečně ty kompetence a ty motivace mít nastaveny správně, tak potom se nám bude dařit i to plánování a nebudeme v tom zacykleném kolečku, kdy vlastně nikdo nemá tu odpovědnost a není nikdo motivován. To znamená, ta otázka je, jestli se těch změn bojíme. Myslím si, že problém bude, když se nebudeme pokoušet ty změny udělat a za to bych velmi rád apeloval. Děkuji za pozornost.
Tak vy jste pojmenoval mnoho výzev. A odkud přetnout to kolečko? Zmiňoval jste, že musíme ho změnit, tak odkud? Koho byste tady potřeboval, aby za vámi přišel a abyste mu vysvětlili, co se má dělat?
Potřebujeme to přepnout tak, aby bylo jasné, kdo teda je odpovědný za ten rozvoj toho území, za to plánování. A my říkáme, aby to byla ta samospráva, aby to byl ten starosta, starostka nebo primátor, primátorka a měl k tomu i ten odpovídající aparát, který ale je vymyšlený, stačí ho převzít. Třeba Česká komora architektů dlouhodobě prosazuje Institut městského architekta nebo nějaké organizace městského architekta. To znamená vzít si na pomoc a pokud bude mít ty odpovídající nástroje, tak potom i ta města budou odpovídajícím a dobrým způsobem se vyvíjet.
Tak hodně štěstí, přeju si, abyste se našli, potkali a aby se to opravdu změnilo, protože ten
Děkuju.
svět se mění. My jsme tady právě slyšeli hned několik příkladů o budoucnosti, která vlastně hýbou, nebo tématech, která hýbou v roce 2026. Všechno to byly takové úvody. Každé to téma by si zasloužilo samostatnou konferenci, tak prosím, určitě vyhledejte ty jednotlivé řečníky, doptejte se na všechny podrobnosti. A nyní je mi teda ctí ukončit tento blok. Projděte si zase veletrh, networkujte, sdílejte a za půl hodiny tady začíná další program v 15:30. Užijte si zbytek odpoledne.